The massive doors of the Deathworld Alliance reception chamber slid open with a hiss that echoed through the cavernous space like a warning from some ancient predator, announcing its presence to the world below. Station Kepler-9 hung in the darkness. Between stars and today, it hosted the most important diplomatic gathering in recent galactic history. Because humanity had finally been invited to join the most exclusive organization in known space, the Deathworld. Alliance consisted of species who came from planets that would kill most other life forms within minutes or even seconds of exposure to their environments, and these survivors had banded together to share knowledge and resources and to prove that they were not just lucky accidents, but the strongest beings the galaxy had to offer. Ambassador Chen Wei walked into the chamber with measured steps, and her boots clicked against the reinforced flooring that could support the weight of a full-grown Krathic warrior, which was roughly equivalent to a small transport vehicle. Back on Earth, behind her floated a modest container that was maybe 2 meters long and 1 meter wide and tall enough to hold something substantial but not threatening in its size. The container was white, with red markings that humans recognized instantly as biohazard warnings, but to the assembled aliens, these symbols meant absolutely nothing at Commander. Vexillor stood at the center of the reception area, and his massive frame towered over most other species present because the Krathic evolved on a world where gravity was 3 times what most species considered survivable. His exoskeleton gleamed under the station lights and bore the scars of countless battles across 17 different war zones, and his mandibles clicked together in what his species considered a neutral greeting. Beside him stood Savith, who represented the Vermoshi delegation, and her transparent environmental suit contained a swirling atmosphere of methane and ammonia that would dissolve most carbon-based life forms like sugar and acid rain. Vermoshi came from a world where the rain itself was weaponized by evolution, and where the strongest survived by learning to breathe poison and call it home. Near the back of the chamber floated 3 shardmines, who were crystalline beings that absorbed solar radiation directly, and who came from a planet orbiting so close to their star that lead would pool into liquid lakes across the surface. 3 species represented the core membership of the Deathworld Alliance, and they had invited humanity to prove themselves worthy of joining their ranks. Ambassador Chen stopped before the assembled representatives, and she smiled in that uniquely human way that showed her teeth, which several species had learned to interpret as friendly rather than threatening, though it took considerable cultural training. Honored members of the Deathworld Alliance, she began, and her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Humanity accepts your invitation with deep gratitude and respect. We understand that membership in your organization requires more than just surviving a harsh homeworld, she continued, while gesturing broadly with her hands in a way that made the Krathic shift slightly, because sudden movements still triggered their predator response instincts. It requires demonstrating that our world has shaped us into something unique and valuable to the greater galactic community, Chen said, and her dark eyes swept across the assembled aliens with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was about to unleash. Therefore, we bring you a gift from Earth, she announced, and the container behind her hummed softly as its stasis field deactivated with a sound like wind through tall grass. A living gift, Chen added, and now several species leaned forward with curiosity because living gifts were traditional among Deathworld species, but they usually consisted of preserved genetic samples or seeds or small organisms in permanent suspension, a gift that we believe embodies the spirit of humanity and our relationship with our homeworld. The ambassador said, and her smile grew slightly wider in a way that would have warned any human observer that something interesting was about to happen. The container's front panel became transparent, and inside the gathered aliens could see something small and fluffy and round with enormous dark eyes that seemed to absorb all available light. The creature was covered in downy white and gray feathers, and it sat on a small perch with its talons gripping the wood with casual strength for a moment. There was absolute silence in the chamber as every species present tried to process what they were seeing, because this tiny ball of fluff looked about as threatening as a dust particle. Then the creature opened its mouth. The sound that emerged was unlike anything most of the species had ever experienced, because it started as a screech that climbed in frequency until it hit the resonant harmonic of the station's hull, plating the entire chamber vibrated, and several species clapped their appendages over their auditory organs, while others simply stood frozen in shock. Commander Vexler actually took a step backward, which was something he had not done since facing a charging boulder beast on his third campaign, and his combat instincts screamed at him that something was very wrong. Scivists. Environmental suit speakers crackled and died as the sound wave interfered with her translation systems, and she was left gesturing wildly with her manipulator appendages trying to communicate through the noise. The three shard mines actually developed stress fractures along their surface structures because the vibration hit frequencies that their crystalline bodies found deeply uncomfortable. Screeching continued for what felt like an eternity but was actually only about 15 seconds. Before the creature paused to take a breath in that brief moment of silence, Ambassador Chen spoke again, with her voice cutting through the ringing in everyone's auditory systems. "This is a Screech Owl chick from Earth," she announced proudly, as if she had just presented them with the greatest treasure in the known universe. Specifically, this is a barn owl owlet who we have temporarily designated as humanity's gift to the Alliance. Chen continued while the owl chick opened its mouth again. For round 2 of its acoustic assault barn, owls are apex predators on Earth, and they hunt in complete darkness, using only their hearing, which is acute enough to detect a mouse's heartbeat under snow. The ambassador explained, and had to raise her voice as the screeching resumed. They fly in total silence despite having a wingspan that will eventually reach nearly 2 meters. Chen added and gestured to the now screaming ball of feathers and rage, and they strike with enough force to crush the skulls of their prey. We call this particular individual Smallwing. She finished, and several species wondered if humanity had a strange sense of irony or if they genuinely did not understand how names were supposed to work. The screeching continued, and now it had developed a rhythmic quality, as if the owlet was trying to establish some kind of acoustic territory marker that would warn all other life forms to stay away from its personal space. Commander Vexler, translator, finally rebooted, and his first words were, "Ambassador Chen, what exactly do you expect us to do with this creature?" Chen's smile became absolutely radiant, and every experienced diplomat in the chamber suddenly felt a chill run through their equivalent of a spine. "Why, Commander," she said sweetly, "we expect you to care for Smallwing as a gesture of friendship between our species and to learn from each other through this cultural exchange." The screeching reached a new pitch that made the lights flicker. "The owlet will need proper care and feeding and social interaction," Chen continued, as if describing the simplest task in the universe. "And I have prepared detailed care instructions, which I will transmit to your station's database." "How long," Vexler asked slowly, "will we be hosting this gift?" "Oh, until Smallwing reaches full maturity," Chen replied cheerfully, "which should be about 6 to 8 months in Earth Standard Time." The screeching intensified, and somewhere in the back of the chamber, a Vermoshi delegate fainted, which was particularly impressive since their species did not actually have a centralized nervous system that would normally allow for fainting. "We believe this will be an excellent opportunity for cultural exchange," Ambassador Chen concluded, and began gathering her things as if everything was proceeding exactly according to plan, because the screeching had not stopped and would not stop for quite some time. Commander Vexler had fought in 17 planetary campaigns and survived encounters with creatures that could tear through starship hulls with their bare claws, and he had never once backed down from a challenge in his entire military career. So, when he volunteered to personally oversee the care of the human's gift, he did so with the full confidence of a warrior who believed that managing one small Earth predator would be well within his capabilities. How wrong he was would become legendary throughout the Deathworld Alliance. First day started with what the humans called an orientation period, where Vexler reviewed the care instructions that Ambassador Chen had transmitted to the station database. The document was extensive and covered topics ranging from dietary requirements to environmental enrichment to behavioral patterns and warning signs of distress. Vexler skimmed through most of it because he assumed that caring for a small bird would be relatively straightforward. Compared to the complex military logistics he managed daily, he moved Smallwing's container to his personal quarters, which occupied a significant portion of the station's command level and offered plenty of space for both him and the Alatha moment. He opened the container to transfer Smallwing to a more permanent habitat. The screeching began again. It started at a level that was merely uncomfortable, but quickly escalated to something that Vexiller's auditory system interpreted as a direct threat display. The sound waves bounced off the metal walls of his quarters and created interference patterns that made his antennae vibrate. Painful as Mellowing stood on the perch, with wings slightly spread and head bobbing up and down, in what the care instructions described as normal, juvenile begging behavior, except the instructions had failed to adequately convey just how loud and persistent this begging behavior would be. 6 hours later, the screeching had not stopped. Station personnel from 3 different sections filed noise complaints. The Vermoshi delegation requested temporary quarters on the opposite side of the station, because the sound waves were creating harmonic resonances in their methane atmosphere that made coherent thought nearly impossible to shard means developed additional stress fractures and had to enter regenerative suspension for repair. Sveller sat in his quarters with his head in his primary manipulator appendages and wondered what exactly humanity had done to him on day 3. Vexiller decided that perhaps the screeching was related to hunger, and he attempted to feed Smallwing using the station's standard protein ration packs, which were nutritionally balanced and suitable for most carbon-based life forms. He placed several ration cubes near the owlet and waited for the grateful silence that would surely follow once the creature realized it was being fed. Smallwing looked at the ration cubes and then looked at Vexiller with those enormous, dark eyes that seemed to contain nothing but judgment and disappointment. Then the owl screeched even louder. Vexiller contacted Ambassador Chen in what he told himself was not panic but merely a request for clarification on certain dietary specifications. Commander, Chen said, and her voice contained barely suppressed amusement. Did you read the dietary section of the care instructions? Reviewed the general guidelines, Vexiller replied stiffly, while Smallwing continued to screech in the background barn. Owls are obligate carnivores, Chen explained patiently. They require whole prey items, including bones and fur, because their digestive systems need the complete nutritional package. Whole prey items, Vexiller repeated. Slowly, yes, frozen mice are ideal, but the replicator patterns Ascent should allow you to produce appropriate food items from your station's organic matter reserves. Chen said the screeching will stop once Smallwing is properly fed, she added, and then signed off before Vexiller could ask any more questions. It took the station's quartermaster 4 hours to set up the replicator patterns for frozen mice and another 2 hours to produce a sufficient quantity. When Vexiller finally presented Smallwing with an appropriate meal, the owlet immediately stopped screeching and began the process of swallowing a frozen wallow. Mousehole, the silence was glorious and lasted almost 30 minutes before the begging behavior resumed. By day 7, Vexiller had established a feeding routine, and the screeching had decreased to only occurring at specific times, which the care instructions called meal anticipation periods. However, a new problem had emerged. Smallwing had claimed Vexiller's quarters as personal territory and defended this claim with surprising aggression for something that weighed less than a standard datapad. When Vexiller attempted to enter his own sleeping chamber, the owlet would spread wings to their full span, which was already approaching half a meter, and perform what the instructions described as a threat display. This involved making the body appear larger while producing clicking sounds with the beak and hissing in a way that somehow seemed more threatening than the screeching. Vexiller, who had stared down charging boulder beasts and faced enemy warriors in close combat, found himself actually backing out of his own room. The other Alliance members began to notice Esavith encountered Vexiller in the corridor outside his quarters at what should have been his designated rest period. Commander, she asked through her repaired translator, why are you not in your quarters? The owlet is resting. Vexiller replied with as much dignity as he could manage, and I did not wish to disturb. Its Savith species did not have facial expressions, but her body language suggested what humans would call barely contained laughter. The mighty Krathic warrior driven from his own territory by a juvenile bird, she said, and her translator added, helpful emotional context tags it as temporary. Vexiller insisted the care instructions indicate that this Territorial behavior will diminish as the owlet matures and bonds with its caretaker. Of course, Commander Sabbath replied, and then transmitted the conversation to approximately half the station's crew because Vermoshi had no concept of discretion when it came to entertaining information. By week 2, the entire station knew that Commander Vexler had been sleeping in his office because Smallwing had taken over his personal quarters. The owlet had also begun exploring beyond the immediate living space and had discovered the ventilation system. Barn owls in their natural Earth habitat nested in enclosed spaces like barns and hollow trees, and the station's ventilation ducts apparently provided a similar environment. Station maintenance crews began reporting sightings of a small white and gray shape moving through the ductwork at odd hours. Screeching had evolved into different vocalizations, including soft churring sounds that the care instructions indicated were contentment, and loud hissing that meant territorial warnings. Vexler spent increasing amounts of time researching Earth's ecology because he realized that understanding the owlet required understanding its evolutionary context. What he learned both fascinated and disturbed him. Barn owls had evolved to hunt in complete darkness, using hearing so acute that they could detect a heartbeat through snow and soil. Their wings had specialized feathers that disrupted sound waves, making their flight completely silent. They struck with precision that required calculating three-dimensional trajectories in microseconds, and they were just one of thousands of predatory bird species on Earth. Ambassador Chen, Vexler said during their weekly check-in call, "I have questions about Earth's ecosystem." Of course, Commander Chen replied, "I am happy to help. Your planet produced barn owls as a common predator species." Vexler began, "What prey did they evolve to hunt that required such sophisticated adaptations?" "Oh, mostly small rodents," Chen said casually. "Mice and voles and rats and things like that. And these rodents required silent flight and enhanced hearing to catch." Vexler asked. "Well, they evolved pretty good hearing and threat detection themselves," Chen explained. "It is an evolutionary arms race where both predator and prey keep developing better abilities. Your entire planet is engaged in constant evolutionary warfare," Vexler said slowly. "I suppose that is one way to look at it," Chen agreed. "We just call it nature." Smallwing chose that moment to fly across the camera view with wings spread and talons extended as the owlet practiced hunting techniques on a piece of station equipment. "Commander, you might want to provide enrichment activities," Chen suggested. "Young owls need mental stimulation." "Enrichment activities," Vexler repeated. "Yes, puzzles and hunting practice and toys," Chen said. "Otherwise Smallwing will get bored and invent entertainment." The lights in Vexler's office flickered as somewhere in the ventilation system an owl discovered how much fun it was to pull on electrical conduits. "I will review the enrichment section of the care instructions," Vexler said. The screeching had become less frequent, but somehow that made everything worse, because now he never knew when it would start again. 2 months had passed since Smallwing arrived at station. Kepler-Neen and the owlet had undergone a transformation that left the entire crew both amazed and deeply unsettled. The fluffy ball of feathers and Screeching had grown into something else entirely. Smallwing now measured nearly 40 centimeters tall, with a wingspan approaching 150 centimeters, and the downy baby feathers had been replaced by sleek adult plumage in shades of white and gold and brown. But the physical changes were nothing compared to the behavioral evolution. The Screeching had stopped almost completely and been replaced by something far more disturbing, which was absolute silence. The owlet had discovered how to hunt. Station personnel began reporting encounters that followed a disturbingly consistent pattern during the night cycle. They would be walking through corridors, going about their duties. When they would feel the distinct sensation of being watched, looking around, they would see nothing but shadows and ordinary station architecture. Then they would notice 2 enormous dark eyes reflecting whatever minimal light was available. Those eyes would be watching them with the infinite patience of something that had been designed by evolution to wait for exactly the right moment before they could react. There would be a rush of air, and something large would pass overhead on wings that made absolutely no sound at all. The owls never actually attacked anyone, but these encounters left crew members shaken because they realized that if Smallwing had wanted to strike, they would never have seen it coming. Vexler had become something of an expert on barn owl behavior through necessity and long hours spent reviewing Earth's ecological databases, he learned that adult barn owls could hear a mouse's heartbeat under nearly a meter of snow. He learned that their asymmetrical ear placement allowed them to triangulate sounds in 3 dimensions with such precision that they could catch prey in complete darkness. He learned that the specialized structure of their wing feathers disrupted air currents in ways that eliminated the sound of flight entirely. He learned that despite their relatively light body weight, barn owls struck with enough force to crush small skulls and break bones, and he learned that Smallwing was still technically a juvenile who had not yet reached full size or hunting capability. The realization was sobering one evening during the station's night. Cycle Savith was working late in one of the engineering sections, running diagnostics on the atmospheric processors, the Vermoshi. The engineer had grown comfortable on the station over the past months and had established her own routines that included bringing small containers of specialized nutrients to consume during long work sessions. She placed her container on a workstation console and turned to examine a particularly stubborn sensor array that kept giving inconsistent readings behind her. There was no sound, no warning, no indication that anything had changed. When Savith turned back around, she found Smallwing perched on the console directly beside her nutrient container. The owl sat motionless with wings slightly spread and talons gripping the metal surface with casual strength. Those enormous dark eyes watched her with an intensity that made her environmental suit's temperature regulators work overtime for several seconds, neither being moved. Then Smallwing spread wings to full extension, which in the confined space of the engineering section seemed impossibly large. Leaned forward and clicked its beak twice, which the care instructions had taught everyone was a threat behavior, but Smallwing did not attack. Instead, the owl simply sat there, demonstrating with perfect clarity that it could have struck if it had chosen to do so. The message was unmistakable, and Savith understood immediately that she had violated some territorial boundary that the AL considered important. She slowly backed away from the console and left the engineering section with far more haste than dignity. Later, when she reported the encounter to other crew members, she would tell them that looking into Smallwing's eyes had given her a profound understanding of why Earth's small mammals evolved to fear the dark. Vexiller added the incident to his growing file of owl-related encounters and began studying Earth's predator-prey dynamics with renewed focus. What he discovered changed his entire perspective on humanity, and their homeworld Earth had not produced one apex predator, had produced thousands there. Predators that hunted by sight, and predators that hunted by smell, and predators that hunted by hearing. There were ambush predators in pursuit, predators and pack hunters and solitary stalkers. There were predators in the air and on the land and in the oceans and even underground. And they all competed with each other while simultaneously competing with prey species that were evolving their own survival strategies. The complexity was staggering. Vexler found himself in a video call with Ambassador Chen at 3 a.m. station time because the questions had been keeping him awake. Ambassador, he said without preamble, to understand something fundamental about humans, of course, Commander. Chen replied, and she looked alert despite the hour, which suggested that humans required less sleep than his species, or that she had been expecting this conversation. Humans are classified as persistence predators with advanced pattern recognition and tool use capabilities. Vexler began this places you roughly equivalent to Krothic in terms of hunting strategy. That is a reasonable comparison, Chen agreed, but your planet also produced barn owls, Vexler continued, and gestured to where? Smallwing was visible through his office window, perched on what used to be a decorative sculpture. And according to your databases, Earth also has wolves and bears and great cats and crocodilians and sharks and venomous serpents. All accurate, Chen confirmed, and creatures called box jellyfish that can kill with a touch, and parasitic organisms that hijack other species, nervous systems, and microscopic bacteria that cause diseases. Vexler went on, and his voice was rising slightly. And something called a honey badger that your own files describe as unreasonably aggressive. The honey badger's reputation is well earned, Chen said with a slight smile, and birds called cassowaries that have claws capable of disemboweling large prey and are described as the most dangerous bird on Earth. Vexler finished. Cassowaries are very real and very dangerous. Chen agreed, though I should mention that the most dangerous bird title is somewhat debated. Vexillor was silent for a long moment while he processed this information, Ambassador Chen. He finally said, "You did not send us Smallwing to mock our capabilities." "No, Commander, we did not," Chen replied, and her expression became serious. "You sent us a reminder," Vexillor continued. "A reminder of what?" Chen asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. That humans did not become apex predators by being the strongest or having the best natural armor or possessing the deadliest venom, Vexillor said slowly as the pieces came together in his mind. You became apex predators by surviving on a world that was actively trying to kill you. In 10,000 different ways and learning from each threat and adapting and ultimately thriving anyway, he continued. Smallwing is not the threat on your world, Vexillor said, and looked at the owl through the window. Smallwing is just one of many, and you made it work for you. Chen's smile widened into something that showed far too many teeth. We domesticated wolves into dogs, Commander. She said we took an apex pack predator and made it into humanity's best friend. Some humans keep venomous snakes as companions for enjoyment. She continued. We climb the highest mountains and dive into the deepest ocean trenches and explore the most hostile parts of our own planet for recreation. We invented extreme sports where we throw ourselves off cliffs and out of aircraft for fun, Chen added, because apparently surviving our planet's natural dangers was not exciting enough. Smallwing is not a warning, Commander, she finished. Smallwing is an invitation to understand what Deathworld really means when you are talking about humans, Vexillor. Looked at the owl, and then back at Ambassador Chen. I am beginning to understand, he said quietly through the window. Smallwing rotated his head 180 degrees, which should have been anatomically impossible, but apparently was completely normal for owls, and watched the conversation with those dark eyes that seemed to absorb all available light. The owl spread wings briefly in a stretch that displayed perfect evolutionary engineering, and then settled back into watchful stillness somewhere. In the station, a crew member screamed as they encountered the silent hunter in an unexpected corridor. The screeching had stopped, but everyone was learning that silence could be far more terrifying. The breakthrough came during a crisis that no one had anticipated, though in retrospect perhaps someone should have considered that a Deathworld Alliance station might attract the wrong kind of attention. Station Kepler-9 occupied a strategic position along several major trade routes, and its inhabitants included some of the most formidable warriors in known space, which made it a tempting target for pirates, who were either very brave or very stupid based on what happened next. They were definitely very stupid. The attack began at 0300 station time, when most of the crew was in their rest cycles. Pirates used a stolen military-grade breaching pod to punch through the outer hole in Section 7, which happened to be one of the residential area station alarms. Began wailing immediately, but the pirates had prepared for this and deployed jamming equipment that disrupted internal communications. A dozen raiders stormed through the breach, wearing heavy combat armor and carrying plasma weapons that could cut through most known materials. They moved with the confidence of beings who believed they were the most dangerous things in their immediate environment. They were very wrong about that, though.
At first, 3 pirates rounded a
corner into a corridor that should have been empty and found themselves face to face with something their threat assessment systems had no Category 4. Smallwing sat perched on an exposed pipe near the ceiling, and the owl had been sleeping until the breach alarm triggered its territorial defense instincts. Barn owls were not aggressive toward creatures they did not consider prey or threats to their nesting sites, but barn owls were intensely territorial, and these armored intruders had just invaded what Smallwing considered personal space. The owl spread wings to full extension, which in the narrow corridor created an intimidating silhouette. Then Smallwing struck. 400 million years of evolutionary refinement went into that attack. Owl dropped from the perch in absolute silence, and talons extended forward with the precision of a guided missile. Barn owl talons were designed to pierce skulls and crush spines, and the fact that these particular targets wore armor meant nothing. 2 instincts that had been perfected long before humans invented metalworking. Lead Pirate's helmet had a reinforced visor rated to withstand small arms fire. It was not rated to withstand a barn owl traveling at maximum velocity with talons. Positioned to exploit the weak points where the visor met the helmet body, the pirate went down screaming while Smallwing rebounded off the helmet and disappeared into the shadows before the other two raiders could even raise their weapons. They fired anyway, and their plasma bolts scorched the walls, but hit nothing. But Empty Air Smalling attacked again from a different angle. The owl had lived on the station for 2 months and knew every ventilation shaft and maintenance access corridor. In shadowed alcove, the pirates were in unfamiliar territory, shooting at an enemy they could not see or hear. It was not a fair fight by the time the third pirate fell, the others had heard the screaming over their communication channels and converged. On Section 7, with weapons ready, they found their 3 colleagues, unconscious and stripped of their weapons, and their armor showed deep scratches from something with very sharp talons. They did not find the owl. What followed was 10 minutes of the most one-sided combat most of the remaining pirates would ever experience. Mauling moved through the corridors like a ghost and struck from darkness with perfect timing. The owl did not kill anyone, because barn owls were precision hunters who knew exactly how much force to use, but pirates would carry the scars and the nightmares for the rest of their lives. When Alliance security finally arrived after sorting out the communication jamming, they found 9 pirates unconscious in various corridors. All of them were stripped of weapons. All of them had deep talon marks on their armor and exposed body parts. All of them were muttering about demons and eyes in the dark and monsters that flew in silence. 2 pirates had barricaded themselves in a storage closet and refused to come out. One pirate was found hanging upside down from a ventilation grate with his armor webbing tangled in the metal, and he claimed that a white demon had placed him there as a warning to others. The 12th pirate had fled back to the breaching pod and was halfway to their ship before security caught him. Vexler arrived at Section 7 to find Smallwing perched calmly on top of a storage locker, preening feathers as if nothing unusual had happened. Owl looked exactly like a gentle ball of white and gold feathers, and those enormous dark eyes radiated nothing but innocent curiosity, curiosity around. The owl lay the evidence of a systematic tactical response that would have impressed most military commanders. Vexilla stared at the scene for a full 30 seconds. He looked at the unconscious pirates. He looked at their stripped weapons arranged in a neat pile. He looked at the talon marks on their armor. He looked at Smallwing, who chirped softly and went back to preening. Then Vexiller started laughing. It was not the polite clicking that Krothic used for social situations, but the deep harmonic rumbling that his species reserved for moments of genuine revelation. Savith arrived moments later and found the commander standing amid unconscious pirates while laughing, and an owl sat nearby looking pleased with itself. Commander Savith said cautiously, "Are you experiencing a malfunction?" "No, Savith." Vexiller replied, and his mandibles were still clicking. With amusement, "I am experiencing understanding." He activated his communicator and connected directly to Ambassador Chen, despite the early hour. "Ambassador Chen," he said, "I need to tell you something." "Yes," Commander Chen replied, and she sounded concerned. "We received automated alerts about a breach at your station." "The breach has been contained," Vexilla assured her, "and the hostile forces have been neutralized by your security teams." Chen asked by Smallwing. Vexilla corrected. There was a brief pause. "The owl neutralized armed pirates," Chen said slowly. 12 of them, Vexiller confirmed, "and did so with such efficiency that our security teams arrived to find the situation already resolved." "That is remarkable," Chen said, and she sounded impressed, but not particularly surprised. "Ambassador, I finally understand what you were trying to teach us," Vexiller said. "What is that?" Commander Chen asked. "You live on a planet with barn owls and wolves and bears and great cats and venomous creatures and parasitic organisms and cassowaries." Vexiller began. "We have discussed Earth's biodiversity before," Chen agreed. "But I did not fully grasp the implications," Vexiller continued. "Humans evolved alongside all of these threats. You developed persistence hunting not because you were faster or stronger, but because you could outlast prey that would kill you in direct confrontation." He said you developed pattern recognition because your survival depended on learning which plants were poisonous and which animals were dangerous and which territories belonged to predators. Vexiller went on, You developed tool use because your bodies lacked natural weapons, so you had to create them. He continued, and you developed social cooperation. Because a lone human was prey, but a group of humans with tools and knowledge and tactics could take down anything. Vexler finished. Every human adaptation exists because Earth spent millions of years trying to kill your ancestors, and the only ones who survived were the ones who got creative. He said the Krothic became powerful through natural armor and strength, Vexler explained. The Vermoshi through environmental advantages, and the Shard Mines through energy absorption, but humans became powerful through learning and adaptation and the willingness to turn threats into tools. He concluded. Ambassador Chen was quiet for a moment. Commander, that is perhaps the most insightful analysis of human evolution I have heard from a non-human. She finally said. Smallwing taught me, Vexler replied simply.
I was a perfect.
This owl is a perfect hunter within its evolutionary niche, but on Earth it is just one of many such hunters, and humans learn from all of them, he continued. You've studied how wolves hunt in packs and applied those tactics to your own hunting strategies. You observed how various predators used camouflage and terrain and developed your own versions. Vexler said you even domesticated some of your planet's predators and made them into partners, he added, which is perhaps the most human response possible to living on a death world through the communicator he could hear. Chun's smile. We do tend to befriend things that try to kill us, she agreed. It is easier than fighting. Then Vexler looked at Smallwing, who had finished preening and was now watching the security teams process the unconscious pirates with those impossibly large, dark eyes. This owl is not a gift meant to showcase Earth's dangers, Vexler said. It is a gift meant to showcase human creativity in the face of those dangers. Every species in the Alliance survived their homeworld through natural advantages. He continued, but humanity survived through learned advantages, which makes you potentially the most adaptable species in known space. Vexler finished. We like to think so, Chen replied, though we try to stay humble about it. Smallwing chose that moment to screech loudly, which the owl had not done in weeks. The sound made the unconscious pirates stir and moan in their sleep. The screeching has returned. Vexler observed. Smallwing is probably asking for food, Chen said. Defending territory is hungry work. As if to confirm this, the owl screeched again and looked expectantly at Vexler. I will replicate some mice. The commander said understanding had dawned, but apparently feeding schedules remained constant. 6 months had passed since a human diplomatic vessel docked at Station Keplerine and delivered a small, screeching owlet to the most formidable warrior species in the known galaxy. 6 months since Commander Vexler had volunteered to care for what he assumed would be a simple gift from a fellow Deathworld species. 6 months since the Deathworld Alliance had begun to truly understand what it meant when humans called Earth home today. The station hosted the formal induction ceremony that would make humanity an official member of the Alliance, and representatives from 30 different species had traveled from across the galaxy to witness the historic occasion. The Grand Ceremony Hall had been decorated according to traditional Alliance customs, with banners representing each member species and lighting adjusted to accommodate various visual spectrums. At the center of the hall stood a podium carved from compressed metals harvested from a neutron star's debris field, because the Alliance believed in symbolism that reflected their collective strength. Beside the podium stood a specially designed perch constructed from Earth's oak wood that Ambassador Chen had provided, along with very specific placement instructions on that perch sat Smallwing's owlet. Had grown into a magnificent adult barn owl, with plumage in shades of white and gold and brown that seemed to glow under the hall's lighting. The owl's wingspan now measured over 160 centimeters, and those enormous dark eyes surveyed the assembled crowd with the calm confidence of an apex predator that had nothing to prove. Several species in the audience shifted uncomfortably when those eyes passed over them. They had heard the stories. Everyone had heard the stories. The tale of 12 armed pirates neutralized by a single bird had spread throughout Alliance space within days of the incident. It had been followed by numerous other accounts of Smallwing's activities on the station, including the time the owl had somehow accessed a secure storage area and nested on classified documents, and the incident where a visiting dignitary had made the mistake of attempting to pet the pretty bird. dignitary had required medical attention's mowing. Had required nothing except perhaps a minor scolding that the owl completely ignored. The ceremony began with traditional greetings from the Alliance Council members, who each spoke briefly about the importance of unity among Deathworld species. Then as Commander Vexler approached the podium to give the formal induction speech, the Krothic warrior stood tall, and his ceremonial armor gleamed under the lights as he addressed the assembled crowd. Honored members of the Deathworld Alliance and distinguished guests, he began, we gathered today to welcome humanity into our organization. The Alliance was founded on the principle that species who survive the harshest worlds develop unique strengths and perspectives that benefit all. Vexler continued, we invited humans to join us because we recognized in them the hallmarks of Deathworld survivors. He said we saw their resilience and adaptability and innovation born from necessity. What we did not understand was the depth of these traits. Vexler paused and gestured toward Smallwing, who rotated his head to regard the crowd with what several species swore was judgment in those dark eyes. 6 months ago, Ambassador Chen presented us with a gift, the commander said, a living creature from Earth that she claimed embodied the human spirit. We saw a small fluffy bird that screeched endlessly. Vexler admitted, and several species in the audience made sounds of agreement. We did not see what humanity was trying to teach us. He continued this. Owl hunts in absolute darkness, using hearing so acute it can detect a heartbeat through. Snow, Vexler explained, it flies in complete silence despite having wings that span nearly 2 meters. It strikes with precision that requires calculating 3-dimensional trajectories in microseconds, he went on, and it does all of this as a common predator on Earth. The audience stirred at this information. Barn. Owls are not rare on humanity's homeworld. Vexler said they are not exotic or unusual, or particularly noteworthy by Earth standards. What? They are simply one of thousands of predatory species that humans evolved alongside. He continued, and this is the critical lesson we needed to learn. The Krothic became strong through surviving, crushing gravity and megafauna that could destroy starships, Vexler explained. We developed natural armor and enhanced strength and combat instincts. The Vermoshi adapted to atmospheres that dissolve most life forms, he said. They developed resistant biology and alternative metabolic pathways. Shard mines evolved to absorb stellar radiation directly, Vexler continued. They became living solar collectors with crystalline structures. Each of us adapted to our environment through natural advantages, he concluded, but humanity adapted through learned advantages. Humans do not have natural armor, so they invented protective gear. Vexler said they do not have enhanced strength, so they created tools and weapons. They do not have specialized environmental resistances, so they developed technology to modify their surroundings. He went on, and most importantly, they do not have natural predatory abilities, so they studied every predator on their world and learned from each one. Vexler finished where we saw a gift that screeched. They saw a hunter that could teach us new ways to perceive silence. He explained where we saw a territorial predator. They saw a partner that would defend its chosen space with absolute dedication. Smallwing is not merely a bird, Vexler declared. Smallwing is a demonstration of human philosophy toward their death world. Humans do not just survive their world's dangers. He said they study them and befriend them and learn from them and sometimes make them into companions. This is what makes humanity uniquely qualified for Alliance membership, Vexler concluded. They bring not just strength but adaptability, and not just survival but innovation. The crowd responded with various species-specific sounds of approval. Ambassador Chen stepped forward to address the assembly. Wore formal diplomatic attire, but her expression was warm as she looked out at the gathered representatives. The Deathworld Alliance has spent centuries sharing survival techniques from your respective worlds, Chen began, and humanity is deeply honored to contribute our own perspective. We believe that the most dangerous thing about a death world is not the threats themselves, but the creativity those threats inspire in the species trying to survive them, she said. Earth has taught us that any problem can be solved with sufficient observation and experimentation and willingness to try unconventional solutions, Chen continued. We have domesticated predators and turn them into loyal companions, she explained. We have studied venomous creatures and developed antivenoms that save lives. We have observed birds like Smallwing and used their abilities to inspire our own technological innovations. Chen went on silent flight technology and directional acoustic sensors and dozens of other applications. This is what humanity offers the Alliance, she concluded. It's not just our own capabilities, but our approach to turning challenges into opportunities. A Vermoshi delegate raised a manipulator appendage from the audience. Ambassador Chen, the delegate asked, I must know something that has been troubling many of us. Of course, Chen replied, how many other creatures like Smallwing exist on Earth? The Vermoshi asked. Chen pulled up a holographic display that showed Earth's biodiversity statistics. Barn owls specifically number around 10 million individuals. She said, but if you were asking about species that could serve similar roles as hunters or companions or teachers, she expanded the display to show the full extent of Earth's cataloged life forms. We have approximately 8 million species on Earth. Chen continued, though we are still discovering new ones regularly. Many of these are microorganisms or plants, she added, but several 100,000 are animals with various levels of complexity and capability. The audience erupted in sounds of alarm from various translators. Systems several shard mines actually developed. Visible stress fractures. One Krothic warrior made a choking sound that suggested his species' equivalent of shock. 8 million species. Someone repeated, on a single planet. Someone else added, how do you survive? A third voice asked. We adapt. Chen replied simply, Molwing chose that moment to spread wings fully and release a screech that harmonized with the station's resonant frequency. The sound was deafening and perfect, and somehow seemed to emphasize Chen's point better than any words could. Then silence, complete and absolute silence, as the owl settled back into a relaxed posture. That silence. Vexler spoke again. Welcome to the Alliance, humanity, he said. Suspect we are going to learn a great deal from one another. From his perch, Smallwing rotated his head 270 degrees, which still disturbed several species who believed heads should not move that way. The owl watched the assembled aliens with those enormous dark eyes that seemed to contain infinite patience. The screeching had stopped long ago, but everyone present understood that this was somehow more significant than if it had continued, because silence meant the predator was confidence. Silence meant the hunter had no need to announce its presence. Silence meant that Smallwing, and by extension humanity, had nothing left to prove. The formal ceremony concluded with traditional Alliance rituals and the signing of membership documents and the exchange of gifts between species. But what everyone would remember was not the speeches or the formalities,